Hello, everybody, and a special shout out to all the ACLU members tuning in this afternoon. Happy Thursday, happy last day of April, and welcome to the ACLU of Pennsylvania's all member webinar. This webinar I'm especially excited for. It's called Inside the PA Legislature. And my name is Mike Lee. I probably should have led with that. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm fortunate to lead our work at the ACLU of Pennsylvania as the executive director. I want to thank you all again for being here today, for your support, for your trust, and your determination to stand up for democracy, as well as for your rights and the rights and liberties of our neighbors, friends, and other Pennsylvanians. Since 1941, the ACLU of Pennsylvania has been an autonomous affiliate of the ACLU, existing at the forefront of safeguarding civil liberties and advancing equity for all Pennsylvanians. Our staff, board of directors, and volunteers work tirelessly on a range of issues protecting civil liberties, such as freedom of speech, voting rights, immigrants' rights, racial justice, criminal legal reform, and advocating for LGBTQIA plus equality and due process for all. As I mentioned, we find ourselves in challenging times, but throughout these times, we choose community and each other over chaos. The Trump administration wants us to lose faith in the rule of law. They want us to live in a country rooted in fear, where the powerful and rich go unchecked. Free speech is for some and silenced for those who dissent. Marginalized communities live under threat and duress, and the freedom that we promised ourselves 250 years ago is only felt by some. At the ACLU, both nationally and in Pennsylvania, we're fighting for a different kind of America, an America that is expansive, a place where every person, no matter their background, can live freely, with dignity, and under the protection of their constitutional rights and civil liberties. We are a country by and for the people, and we know that in Pennsylvania better than anywhere else. Pennsylvania and America belongs to all of us, and all of us belong in Pennsylvania and the United States. Today, we're going to hone in on a really important topic, our state government, or as Harrisburg, as some people call it. We're also going to talk about our legislative work. This conversation will be led and guided by our ACLU Pennsylvania legislative team, two aces, if I could say so, and they're going to give us a behind the curtain peek of how we do our state level advocacy and policy work with legislators, coalition partners, constituents, and decision makers who are fighting for a Pennsylvania where we can all, where defending ourselves is not just a theory, but we live it in practice. Before we get started, I have a few logistics. First, as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. We plan on posting it as well, so please share the knowledge that you hear today, as well as future links with all this great information. If you need closed captions, you can enable them on a feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen under the title Live Transcript. And lastly, we will be utilizing the Q&A function during the call. So please engage, ask questions, and send us your thoughts and comments, and we'll be sure to get them answered. As I said, we have two experts, two of the best in Pennsylvania, our Director of Legislation, Liz Randall, and our Deputy Director of Legislation, Veronica Miller. They'll showcase some of our best resources that they've been putting together over the years, including a legislative scorecard, a bill tracker, and an amazing website and program called Capital Compass, which is our one-stop shop for Pennsylvania lobbying and legislative training guides, putting power into your hands. So, without further ado, I see Liz and Veronica are already on camera, and we have the first slide teed up. So I'm just going to turn it over to Liz and Veronica to walk us through an inside peek of Pennsylvania legislator.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Mike. We'll go ahead and advance that slide. So up on our agenda for today is a general overview of the General Assembly, just to get acquainted with that. And then we'll talk about our legislative program. And then Liz will come in and give a little bit more description about some of the particulars of our work and also some of those resources that Mike had mentioned. So, Pennsylvania General Assembly. Just a few quick facts. Pennsylvania has the largest full-time legislature in the country. So, as you can imagine, that keeps us very, very busy. One of the reasons why it's necessary for us to have full-time lobbying staff who can be present in the General Assembly, because again, they are extremely active. The Pennsylvania General Assembly has a 2-year legislative session, which begins on odd numbered years. So we are through that first year of the session, and the bills introduced in 2025 are now carried over to this year, 2026. And then at the end of 2026, all of those bills that either have not had any action, they will sort of quote unquote die and will need to be reintroduced at the beginning of 2027. And I think as of this year, we are one of 3 general assemblies with a divided legislature. We have Democratic control in the House, Republican control in the Senate, and obviously we have our Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro. The other 2 states are Michigan and Minnesota. So we have a bicameral House. We have our Pennsylvania House of Representatives, which is considered sort of the lower chamber that is includes a total of 253 legislators. Yes, 253 people who we have to keep track of. And of those members, 102 are the Democrats, 101. So it is a very slim majority. Those representatives are elected to 2-year terms. They represent about 60,000 people per their district. There are 31 standing House committees. And just a little bit of the particulars. In order to pass, we need a simple majority that's 51%, so 102. And then if there is ever a veto override, that's going to be 2/3, which is 67% or 136 votes. Over in the Senate, we have 50 senators. It very closely mirrors sort of Congress in that respect. But so we have 50 senators. It is controlled, like I said, by Republicans. It is a 27-23 split. They are elected to 4-year terms on staggered terms. And there are 23 standing committees in the Senate. And again, simple majority, 51%, 26 votes, 2/3 for veto override, which would be your 34 votes. And right now, currently, all of the House is up for reelection, and excuse me, the even numbered districts in the Senate are up for reelection this year. So a little bit of an overview of our work and our legislative program. Yeah. So for the past 20 years, we have had a dedicated lobbying staff that works in Harrisburg. As you can imagine, there are quite a few bills. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But with such a large, constantly working General Assembly, there are thousands of bills that are introduced every year. And so it's one of the reasons, again, extremely important that we have full-time, knowledgeable staff who can work in Harrisburg to help, again, defend and advance our civil liberties in the General Assembly. So we have our work divvied up into 3 main buckets: lobbying and our legislative advocacy. So this is, our direct contact with our state legislators. This is the work that we do in Harrisburg. And also, we'll talk a bit in a minute about our bill positions and how we convey that information to the General Assembly. And then there's our second bucket of work, which is work with our constituents, coalition, and various partners. That's working also in tandem on our legislative advocacy. So it could be related to a particular bill, or it could be related to a lobby. So, particular issue areas that we partner on. And then our third bucket, which is support for our integrated advocacy. This is where we provide additional support for our statewide campaigns and help on any sort of legislative side of that when there's a legislative component to a campaign. So just some statistics about the sessions and sort of what is happening. So like I said, there are thousands of bills, approximately 4,000 bills introduced per session. We end up tracking a little over 1,000 of those bills. And then ultimately we provide positions for a little over 100. We'll also do lobby trainings, and that's one of the things that Liz will talk about with Capital Compass and some of those resources. And then coalitions that we support. I think one of the things that makes us particularly interesting is that we are not a singular subject organization, right? Like civil liberties covers pretty much the gamut. So we're talking about not only some of our priority areas, criminal legal reform, voting protection, immigration protection, but we're also talking about our large overview constitutional issues, freedom of speech, freedom of press, assembly. We cover all of those issues. So that makes us in addition to just the activity of the General Assembly, just very busy covering a large array of subjects. So a little bit of our statistics for this year. The House introduced well over 2,000 bills. The Senate introduced over 1,000. But you can see that not many of those were enacted, and we can talk a little bit more about why that may be if people have questions about it. But so generally, a lot of bills are introduced, not necessarily a lot are getting enacted. However, when we go to the slide after this and we kind of talk about our bill positions, you'll see that we often do weigh in on quite a few of the bills, and this is often because some of the most active committees are the ones that we monitor quite frequently. Those are the House Judiciary Committees, Senate Judiciary Committees, both chambers, state government committees. That's where a lot of the voting and election law bills come through. Also, education, when we're talking about education equity or things impacting our TLGBTQ plus folks. And so there's a lot of these committees that we will monitor. And so we can go back to the other slide in just a minute, Liz, but just talking about some of the bills that we have scored and the passing of these bills. So just the House, for example, we scored 55 of those bills, 14 of those passed. So the House is quite more active. We see a lot more bills coming out of their House Judiciary, and so we are often providing more position statements based on, just the sheer number of bills. But let's go back and talk a little bit about how we kind of arrive at our positions. And so we can generally take four types of positions. And, obviously we'd like to be supporting more bills than we are opposing, but that is often not necessarily the case. Because the General Assembly has flipped into this sort of divided government, we find ourselves probably more busy than we were before, because not only are we now in a defensive posture with some of the bills coming out of the Senate, some of our more nasty criminal legal bills, but we also find that the House is introducing a lot more bills that we can be supportive, but still may take some issue with. So it just kind of really just ratcheted things up. But so a little bit about our position. So obviously support, we like this bill because it strengthens our civil liberties and it is specific to one of our particular priority issues. So again, that's criminal legal reform, voting protection, immigrants' rights. And then also, some of our, other areas that we do some work in, education equity, like I had mentioned. And so we like these bills. And I will say that maybe they're not 100% what we would like to see, but they are a step. And so Liz and I have said before, if we only supported bills that we like and we thought were like 100% good, we probably wouldn't support anything at all. And so we've got to be able to, give them the information they need to say yes, that this is a step in the right direction. But we also make sure that we let them know that, hey, we'd like to see you go further in the future. If we take a neutral position, which I would say is like neither good nor bad, it just sort of is. That's when we sort of look at the bill, yeah, it does touch on one of our areas, but it again, it's neither good nor bad. It's kind of a sort of a maintenance of status quo. And so we'll take a neutral position on it. And sometimes when we get to our opposed in just a second, neutral is the best that we can get for some of the members in the General Assembly. But so if we are fully opposed to a bill, that means that this is terrible, that it's going to harm, undermine, and we need to do everything we can to push on our levers. And so then we're using, those relationships that we have, that ability to pull in additional partners to work on some of that additional advocacy, right? So that could be our coalitions, that could be constituents if, the bill is so bad that we need to do, I would say, a full court press. That's when we would activate people on that oppose. And then of course, no position. This isn't our bill. This isn't our area. We're not gonna get involved.
Yeah, Veronica, I just wanted to oh, Mike, did you have a question?
I do have a couple of questions, Liz, but feel free to jump in and answer them as well. And thank you for that overview of the largest state General Assembly in the country, Veronica, full-time in the country. Just a lead-off question, if you could just talk very briefly about how you share the bill positions with the people who are going to vote on them. And then I have another question.
Sure. So ordinarily before session, we hope that we get notice, but sometimes the Senate is a little lax in giving the notice that they need to give to people. But so a lot of the pre-work that we have done is having relationships with the executive directors of each of the committees that we monitor, plus the chairs of those committees. So hopefully we have a little bit of a ability to have back and forth. But so whenever we do get notification of a committee meeting and or floor activity for that week of session, we put together, basically a document of all these bills, what our positions are, and then we convey that information directly to the legislators. We send them emails, and sometimes they email us back and say, yes, I 100% agree with your position, or they may tell us otherwise. But so we are directly communicating to them through email. And then during that following week of session, I'm usually in the Capitol following up with some of the executive directors, sometimes meeting with the electeds, kind of talking a bit about some of our positions, maybe if we had to oppose one of their bills. But we're sort of in direct communication quite often.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add too, this was a little bit back to what Veronica was mentioning. I think for us, we found, to be honest, that in some ways our neutral position, which seems sort of like maybe that's like a throwaway kind of position, but in all reality, that actually is probably our most important leverage point for legislators, particularly after the Democrats took control over they took control of the House, because we can be a little bit of a thorn in the side for legislators. And so often we will hear, like, what is it going to take to get the ACLU to neutral? And so they would people would prefer to have our support. Well, not everybody, of course, but often, a supporting position would be ideal. But we're able to exercise a lot of power through an opposed position, that if they amend the bill, and sometimes we are involved in drafting language for amendments or suggesting the changes, what could actually get us to neutral. We typically actually will say that, like, Veronica and I have huge conversations before session weeks. And so, our positions go through, like our legal team looks at things. Some of these bills have been run numerous times, so we don't need to be bothering legal every single time a bill is run. We kind of know what the position is. That being said, we will make sure if we say that we oppose something, we will have an answer for like, what can we do? What kinds of changes will it take for the bill for us to be neutral, to get to neutral on the bill? And so typically that's where we see a lot of changes, whether they change it, they actually might not run the bill at all in committee if they know that we're opposed, but could maybe get to neutral, or that they might amend it in committee in order to move our position typically from opposed to neutral. So just wanted to add that in there. It's an effective, like important kind of position, even though it seems perhaps like less strident than support or oppose. It's actually a very important, like middling position for us that gives us a lot of leverage.
Thank you for that context. And while Veronica, I have two questions from the chat that I'm going to try to merge into one, and it's about the size of our assembly. So I know you said that the House of Representatives represents approximately 60,000 residents per district. Is there any correlation to the number of boroughs and villages and how that total number is figured out?
So no, I would say that it isn't. It's sheer population. So whenever we do have the latest census, and this happened back in 2020 when they had the census, and then the Legislative Reapportionment Commission was reconstituted in order to redraw the districts. They have criteria that they look at, and it's generally population, similar demographics of area, but it doesn't take into consideration boroughs, townships, counties. If you look at our Pennsylvania's legislative maps, you'll see that they can kind of cross between multiple counties, and obviously varying boroughs. So no, I wouldn't say that is one of the things that includes those numbers.
Great.
And I did
And we
see
have a
another
few more.
question about the filed bills and what that
Yep.
meant. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So on our slides when we were talking about the statistics from our session, filed simply refers to the number of bills that have been introduced in that chamber. So legislators, they come up with an idea, they want to introduce a bill, and then they do that. And so that's the total number of bills that have been introduced by the various members in the House or the Senate.
And it's the actual bill language. So typically, like there's co-sponsorship memos where they'll circulate, here's my idea of a bill. In the near future, I will be introducing a bill that does X, Y, or Z. We don't count those as filed because there's no actual bill language that tells you so we don't ever totally trust the co-sponsorship memos. They're largely accurate. No one's trying to be deceptive with them, but they're not a reliable sort of like objective summary of what the bill might do. And so we don't take positions on just the memos that are claiming like, here's an idea for a bill. We don't, until we see that bill language, we don't weigh in on it. We don't take a position on it. So the filed bills are ones that actually had their proposed, pieces of legislation that have actual bill language.
Thank you for that, Liz. And Veronica, I hate to cut you off because I know you're going to inform us with something great, but we have like 3 questions in the chat that I think really speak to the next part of our presentation, and they're around our priorities and how we build support and how we navigate such a large assembly. So Liz, I'll turn it back over to you for the next part of the presentation, you and Veronica, and I'll keep close attention to see if you're hitting on those things. And if not, I'll ask you again from questions in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to say, make sure you like re-up those for me since I'm the one screen sharing, I can't see the comments or the questions. So I'm not ignoring you if I don't get to your specific question. So This next part is sort of broken up into two subparts. One is just doing a little bit more specifics on the three buckets that Veronica had mentioned earlier in terms of how we generally look at our legislative work. And then to kind of walk you through, I'll screen share into like a few examples of resources that we have that you all can access, at home anytime you're interested. And so I'll just sort of walk you through a few of those to give you a little preview, some snippets, and perhaps a little incentive to check out some of our resources. So as Veronica had mentioned, so again, we have these three buckets. The first of which is our lobbying and legislative advocacy. Obviously, this is really probably it's the vast majority of the work that we do. It's the area that keeps us the most busy, and it's what probably everyone is going to think of when they think of what does a legislative or deputy legislative director do for an organization. And so this is all about maintaining, this is inside the Capitol, in the building, and like the direct relationships with legislators. So it's everything from building and maintaining relationships with not just legislators, but I will say we spend an extraordinary amount of time developing relationships with staff. They are really the ones who are the people kind of really behind the curtain, who control a lot, have a lot of information. So we work with them extremely closely. I would say probably more so than even the legislators themselves. Also, obviously, tracking all of the bills, analyzing legislation, taking positions on bills that are running in committee and or on the floor, hosting and coordinating legislative and lobbying actions. We also mentioned before as well, sometimes we get requests to help draft an actual, like a full piece of legislation, and or drafting amendments to bills to help move our position in a particular way. And preparing legislative reports, briefings, scorecards, et cetera. So this is sort of really the cornerstone. This is like the biggest chunk of our work. Here. All right, then the second obviously is working with constituents, supporters, members, coalitions, all of our partners and allies. This is more of our external facing or kind of coordinated and cooperative work that we do. So that ranges everything from being as Veronica had mentioned, the ACLU is really, we are very aware of the fact that we are in a really kind of enviable position, largely due to probably many of you on the call who contribute. Certainly as a union, ACLU, like union member, our C4 work is where this is really imperative, that there are a lot of organizations that just do not have the capacity or the resources to afford to hire internally full-time lobbyists or people that are spending this amount of time in the Capitol. And so we would not be able to do any of that without the support of our members. And so as a result, we are very, we make sure that we are being good allies, because we don't want to ever be sort of hoarding those resources. And so typically when we are in coalition spaces, on calls with allies and other organizations working on issues, we tend to be, we're certainly not the only ones, but we often are the ones that are relied on to at least provide, whether it's updates on what's happening in the Capitol, trying to explain to people how the process actually works. Many people know how a bill becomes a law in Pennsylvania, but that's a big difference from like how you explain it legally and procedurally and how it actually really works in the building. And so we offer a lot of kind of expertise to those, to our coalition partners and allies. And also doing lobbying training. So I'll sort of split this, and in a minute, we'll sort of walk through the Capitol Compass. I'll show you a little highlights from the Capitol Compass website. So we do a lot to make sure that we are sharing, we're not just feeding people, we're teaching them to fish as well. And so this sort of comes from a very deeply held like recognition that we have a lot of partners and allies who do not have the kind of capacity that we do. And so we try to be very generous and like attentive to the fact that we're sitting on a lot of important information and resources, and try to share those and be as supportive as we can with our partners. And then third, again, as Veronica had mentioned, this is sort of what we think about more as like our internal work. And then by internal, though, it's more like the integrated advocacy. So this is everything from how we provide support if comms gets questions on a particular bill or a piece of legislation. Obviously, we sort of field those questions. If there are questions from the legal team on litigation, how this might affect legislative stuff or something that might be happening in the legislature, how that might affect a particular case or potential litigation. So there's a lot of overlap between our different departments. Certainly, if we're trying to take action on a particular bill, then we will involve the rest of our advocacy and policy team in terms of mobilization and organizing. And then also just developing resources, one pagers, leave behinds, things like that, that we provide sort of for the affiliate, generally speaking, on legislatively related issues. So I don't know. At this point, I'm going to switch over to screen sharing my, let me stop this for right now. But Mike, I want to make sure before I get into like the little examples, was there something in the Q&A that I should address at this point?
I guess if you could just talk about advancing legislation in this political climate, maybe compared to 5 years ago or 5 years into the future, when we might have a differently composed legislator.
Oof. I mean, so is the question a comparison one? Is it like what the emphasis of the question?
The biggest challenges of advancing legislation, I guess, in like a split between the control of the Senate and the House.
Yeah, so and Veronica certainly jump in too. I mean, we could have an entire separate webinar on just this subject alone, but I feel like first of all, the majority in the House is not a lot. It is a one vote majority, which means, and there are some very conservative Democrats. And so, like anything else, including at the national and federal levels, like, Democratic and Republican parties those caucuses are not monoliths. And so there's lots of diversity within each of those. I would say that there's a better chance of some things moving out of the House that are proactive. But the chances that they then get picked up in the Senate are pretty de minimis, if not nearly impossible. And so in some ways, it's a bit, say, easier. It's more realistic to think there's even any chance of something passing in the House. But, in the Senate, it's still certainly a challenge and a struggle. But what I will say is that, now that there's the two things that I think have been interesting lessons that I've sort of learned is that once the House flipped, for a long time, Republicans, just assumed we were some like spokespeople. We were in service of the Democratic Party because we were just mostly opposing bills because both chambers were Republican controlled. I don't think they were completely prepared for us opposing a decent number of Democratic bills. They just were either badly drafted, they were proposing things that were not good, they hadn't been thought through, or maybe we just straight up disagree policy-wise. And so it was a very interesting realization and recognition, like our relationships with some, say, more moderate Republicans really escalate. And certainly some of the more conservative libertarian legislators, Republicans, were much more amenable to some of our positions and working with us because they're like, oh no, they do mean what they say. Like, it doesn't matter who is introducing the bill or which party is backing it. We actually stand on our principles. And so that's sort of been like an interesting way that I feel like we've probably gained a little bit of currency within the Republican caucus in ways that I hadn't really expected, because now they were able to actually see like, oh, we have different, we don't really care who the sponsors are. Our position remains the same. We're true to the Constitution.
Right. I'll just hop in real quick because there was a question kind of about a recent win, and I think I would consider our defense quite. I would put it in the winning category because oftentimes we aren't necessarily putting forth a particular bill that we want to have passed at this moment. But so one in particular example is Liz actually doing a very, very good job of beating back a bill that was going to require pre-conviction DNA collection, and having just the full giving the General Assembly like this full sort of like memo of describing like this very particular issue, when it didn't seem that the drafters or the legislators really like knew fully aware. And we were able to get a lot of people to vote no, and Republicans to vote no, those libertarian Republicans that Liz had mentioned. And they haven't brought this bill back up. And so like that is kind of how we measure if we are being successful in the work that we are doing, is how we are able to get them to stop doing some of the things, and then using again some of those relationships that we are building, that sort of capital with Republicans, to be able to go and have further conversations about better ideas in the future.
Yeah. And I'll just, one last thing on that, because I do think that's important to recognize. I think it's very easy. I think one of the things to sort of maybe do a myth busting around sort of wins is, and I didn't see the question, so I'm sort of like assuming I know a little bit the direction of the question, but I like to think of our defensive work as sort of proactive defense. Like, we're really in the business many times. The best role that we play is harm reduction. There are a lot of really bad ideas that I think we have done more. And so it's not as flashy. It's not as fun to talk about. It's not like victory, we win this like really major proactive change. But I do, or I should say like, that all of our work is proactive, but we are very proactive in our defensive work. And I have to say, like, we have been extremely successful in blocking things, creating problems for some bills. They get very grumpy with us. So, there are people, Democratic leadership is not always a huge fan, but that's because, if we're able to intervene to make sure that something is less bad, that is a huge win, because I would say that there are numerous examples of, but for the ACLU, something might have passed that would have been really just absolutely atrocious from Democrats and Republicans. So it's sort of a twofer.
Now, Liz, that is an unbelievable transition to the resources that you have made available to show us today, because but for the ACLU is 40 people, and we're talking about over 4,000 bills per session. And there's some questions in the chat about issue-specific things, and I know we're really talking about empowering everyday residents of Pennsylvania to be able to advocate for themselves, their communities, and their civic organizations. So could you walk us through some of the materials that you provided for us, and then we'll get back to a few questions in the chat.
Sure. I hope this works too. So let me know if anything's going squirrely with the screen sharing. But I wanted to start a little bit so I'm just going to go through a couple of websites, but wanted to show you where to find our legislative work on the ACLU-PA website. So if you go to our homepage, you would click on, is this showing up with like when I'm hovering over the menu? Okay, good. All right. So if you go to our work and you go to legislation, I try very hard to make sure that we keep all of our resources updated and uploaded on our legislative site. We have an overview here. If you click on this, you can, let me see, does that show up as the overview page? Is it still great? All right. So you will also, I think, be sent a PDF of this, but this is a lot of what we've been talking about today in a nicely sort of like designed, I should say, one page kind of leave behind a nice overview of our work. So if you're back to our page here, if you click on our legislative scorecard, we have an interactive scorecard that you can check in on that we update all the time. So it's interactive in the sense that it is constantly being updated. So as bills that we have taken a position on get votes, you move through the scores on those bills are updated in real time on this on our scorecard. So if you scroll down, you'll see this is sort of everyone. It's sort of the default position is that the scores are in descending order. I will say these two, the 100% are like relatively new legislators, so they haven't really been in long enough to take a lot of votes. That's a little bit skewed. That being said, you can sort. What's nice about this is that you can sort by, whether it's alphabetical. There's scores if you want to see who has some of the worst scores. Not so great scores here at the bottom of the pile. You can do it by district numbers. Most people probably don't know their actual districts. Or you can search, if you know your representative or senator's name, you can search by a name. Again, you can look through the district numbers, probably not as helpful. But if you wanted to say, I want to see all the just Republicans in, let's see, let me do descending, go back to here. So the highest score, probably because Ryan McKenzie is no longer in. So he was only in for part of the session. But Abby Major, Joe Hogan, these are not like Tom Mahaffey. These are sort of well-known sort of moderate Republicans. It's funny because some of them will have little arguments like who is at the top of the bottom kind of thing with the Republicans. So like Abby Major always laughs, like who's sort of winning. They don't want to be up at the top because that's not going to be good for them in elections. But they do have little small battles amongst themselves, like who's where at the top of the R list. Or you could just go, let's say the Senate. It's like, boop. So pretty grim over here in the Senate. And let's go, we could do Democrats in the Senate. So then if you want to, on this, you want to click on individual legislators, you'll get some basic information about their office. And what's good is that we've done this scorecard now, I think, since the 2019-2020 session. So you can go through this lifetime score it sort of averages all of these from previous sessions. So you can see what they are now, but what their lifetime score is. So Senator Saval is fairly consistent, but then you can go down and see, but here, I'm sorry, only 3 sessions. So you can see what the bills were in 2021, 2022, 23, 24 session, and then this session. And then these are all of the bills that we have scored. This is why we oppose or support bills. And then if it's in green, so he voted no on these things, the green indicates that he was in alignment with our position. So this is like our position here. Anyway, so you can sort of go through and look at where everyone just sort of, go through the scorecard. So this has become a very, we hear people talking about this, legislators talking about it. People are very interested whether or not we're going to be scoring a bill. We pretty much, anything that we take a position on, we actually score. And so we scored on all of the different issue areas. And we score votes that just come up for committee votes. Also back on our website, you can click to it from here, but I might go back to our to here, which is our scored legislation. So if you click here, this is back on the ACLU website. You can either click on this content or click on this button. And this is sort of the back end of our scorecard, but effectively this is where you would look to see any of the bills. If we've taken a position on a particular bill, you can filter it by any of the categories, the progress, the bill number, like, did we take a position on, let's see, HB 99, which is a death penalty repeal bill that just recently ran out of House Judiciary. So that's yes, you can sort of see where it is. You can also go through our categories, which is good. So any of these bills, even if many bills have we tag under numerous issue areas. So it's like, how many bills are due process related? So you can sort of type into here. Most of the due process ones have different types of categories. Maybe there's reproductive freedom. You can type that in, sort of see. So you can filter and sort according to that. What's also sort of fun in this platform that we use, it's called Bill Track 50. If you click on Vote Index, it's interesting too. So this is, let's look at the House. So you can see, so we have a Democrat here, Frank Burns. This is no surprise to anybody who knows, in a very, very, very conservative district. So he tends to vote more aligned with the Republican caucus. And then Anita Kulik is here. It is unfortunate, and it's only gotten worse. Like this kind of like absolute firm divide between D's and R's. It used to not always look like this, but here we are. In 2026, this is the reality. Also, if you wanted to like look at the Senate, there's only two. So Nick Miller and of course Lisa Boscola, who are sort of mixed in, and then you have the rankings of the remaining ones. The other fun part is if you want to look at heat maps. Ooh, here's like the House. And you can look at, now it doesn't say the legislators, unfortunately, we don't control, this isn't like our platform, but it does tell you the district number. But obviously, the more green something is, the more aligned they are with the ACLU's positions on bill. So this is only referring to ACLU positions, right? So, and then if you want to see something really depressing, here's the Senate, pretty much a Red Sea. And you've got, of course, you have some, Lehigh Valley stuff, but definitely, Southeast and Allegheny. So these are sort of fun excursions here into looking at the back end of our scorecard. So, but again, going back through all of that. And then finally, and then I'll stop for questions, is our Capital Compass website. And this is sort of, we have this on a standalone, we refer to them as microsites, but really this is the best way that we've been doing lobbying presentations for so long that I was like, we need to just put all of this information, all these resources on a separate site. And so what's really great, feel free to browse around Capital Compass, but what I wanted to kind of point out is our resources page. And specifically, so I have some, suggested sort of courses if you want to be like, oh, the basics. So, but all of these different resources are here. So like, for example, let me look at, like intro to the Pennsylvania legislative process. So if you click on this, it says download guide. It's really opening up a Google document. So if you open this up, this gives you pretty much all of the information that you might need to go through to understand sort of the general Pennsylvania legislative process. We do update these regularly, so you'll see where it's updated on the bottom of the pages. So we try to make sure that that every session, at least, we're updating items here. Let me go back to this. Also, we have things, for example, here's some good, like PA legislative lingo glossary. If you're not sure all these terms that we're throwing around, what does this mean? So anyway, we have like a little glossary here as a nice little resource. We also, let me go to, trying to think. Veronica, is there anything that you think? Oh, contacting your PA legislator. So this is good. So anyone who's looking to meet, if you want to call or, meet in person, this kind of gives you sort of why it's important, some of the tips, and then some templates if you want to email or write them for as like different examples of how to get in touch with them if you only want to contact them through snail mail or email. And then if you want to place a call on, how to weigh in on a particular bill by placing a call. So the Capital Compass website is absolutely loaded with like a lot of different resources. Some of these are, I would say, there's a kind of a mix between some of these are kind of 101 kinds of resources. Others are a bit more advanced. So where some of this has been actually quite useful is when we do trainings for coalition partners and allies who kind of understand the basics of how to do things, but need a little bit more of an advanced drill down into some of this. And so the idea being is that if we can get more of our coalition partners and allies sort of skilled up in some of these things, then we are not the sole organization sort of that people are relying on to provide this kind of information. And so we do a lot of work to try to integrate and invite different groups, different allies, different partners, and doing we've done like a boot camp, like a full day training for some of our partners and allies. And so just providing them with these resources. The Capital Compass stuff, I'll just say this for anyone who thinks that these might be helpful either for you personally or for an organization that you work with. We have absolutely no pride in ownership. Feel free to copy and paste stuff. We don't care if there's no plagiarizing or what have you. Like these are all like resources that can be really, really helpful. Also, the quick links is actually sort of good too. There's so many, I have to say, there's a lot of good resources here, but it's just like where to go if you're like, how do I get to this? Where do I want to look for this? It's all the sort of quick links if you want to look for some of the basic stuff. So there's just, it's a veritable smorgasbord of resources. So I will leave it there. See if we have any additional questions.
With all the great information that you both are providing, we have lots of questions, but we only have about 7.5, 8 minutes to try to answer them. But one question that actually led off today that I held off till now is about yesterday's Supreme Court decision, which wasn't good if you're a fan of civil liberties and the Voting Rights Act. So do you, I know it's only been a day, but do you anticipate any additional concerns with redistricting for Pennsylvania when it does come back up?
Hmm. I know, Liz, do you have? Well, so I will say right now, and then Liz, you chime in. But so right now we're in the middle of a very contentious election year, which is not ordinarily, I mean, in the midterms, like not a lot is happening, but right now there is a lot of talk and a lot of, I think, excitement from people in the Senate at the possibility of changing leadership party. Obviously, we're nonpartisan. We have no dog in the Republican versus Democratic fight. But depending on the outcome of both this primary and also the general election, I think we're going to be kind of in a let's see posture. I know that I haven't heard of people in the General Assembly right now tossing out that idea. I know that they are fully aware of what's happening in Texas and California. And I think they are waiting to kind of see what happens. But I do think that there has not been an actual discussion of doing that because of how our districts were redrawn. They were redrawn like extremely competitively. And I think people want to see how that plays out. And this will be, I think, the election year that will show us what that looks like. I don't know, Liz, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's Pennsylvania is just such its own quirky universe, and so sometimes making comparisons with other states is it becomes a little more fraught, and Pennsylvania really is an outlier in terms of its legislature, the diversity and variety of politics that exists, across the board. And so anything that has to do with redistricting is always, I mean, it's always going to be a hot button issue. But yeah, I would say, Veronica, I think you nailed it.
Yeah, and I think we have time for one last question and answer, and I'll try to kind of smush a few together here. Liz, if I go to the scorecard and find out that my state rep is a 0 and my senator is an 8, should I just like give up on politics and hide under a couch or move, or is there a way that I can engage in Capital Compass or other activities to let my presence be known in this low civil liberties kind of a place?
So yeah, so I'm sorry if that is your reality. That is probably the case for many people, unfortunately, that they have legislators that may not be, very responsive to things. What I will suggest is that, one of the things that we try to encourage people to do is to just make a meet and greet appointment at your legislator's in district office. So you don't have to go to Harrisburg. You don't need to prepare like any like significant information or go with like a raft of materials. But sometimes just being like legislators are it can be very like incredibly responsive to constituents who they have a personal relationship with. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends or that you're in all the time, but typically if it's like, I don't really know much about you, you could bring in the scorecard and be like, here are some of the bills. If there's a particular piece of legislation that might resonate for you specifically, to ask the legislator why they voted the way that they did. Obviously, the vote's already done, perhaps, and so maybe you can't change that. But to some extent, there are, we're always hoping that we have constituents who have some kind of like, you just go into the district, introduce yourself, you're not asking for anything in particular, and just establish a baseline rapport with that legislator and even with the staff that's in the office. And so, if and when something comes up, you could say like, oh, look, I know that some such and such a bill is, getting ready to, a Senate floor vote might be pending, or a House floor vote, and just wanted to talk to you about why I think this might be important for you to look at. You never know. I'm not saying so. I don't want to pretend like it's going to have like awesome outcomes every single time, but I don't know that you need to just like wrap it up and go home. But certainly in the, contacting your legislator, how to have an effective meeting, you can go through some of those resources and definitely take advantage of them, even if it's just to stop in, introduce yourself, say you're a constituent, tell them a little bit about yourself, the things you're interested in, and find out a little bit more about the legislator, because sometimes you just never know.
Yeah, that's a great point. You could find out that you went to the same high school. Who
100%.
knows?
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Liz and Veronica, for an awesome, I would say it was a 101 and a 201 into how Pennsylvania legislation works, and more importantly, how the ACLU of Pennsylvania works in that space, in that climate, and a little bit of a preview of how we're trying to expand our capacity and reach by empowering other people and other organizations to stand up and activate for issues that they believe in, especially when it's something that we might not have the capacity for because of our priorities and alignment. I want to thank you all for staying with us this hour and for being part of this conversation this afternoon. We do have some resources that we are going to email out. If there are any questions that we did not get to, I apologize for that, and hopefully we'll be able to find a way to answer them in some of the information we send out. So again, an extra special thanks for our presenters for their time, their insight, putting together such resources. Visit our webpage, go to the legislative site. Don't also forget to go to ACLU-PA /donate. Donation in philanthropy are activism as much as introducing yourself to your elected officials and being a thoughtful citizen and participant in our democracy. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the remaining hours of April. I look forward to seeing you at our next all-member webinar. And please stay informed, stay organized, stay engaged, and stay safe.
Bye, everybody.